Yestermorrow. Welcome to Tiny House Sticky Wickets. So I have a PowerPoint presentation, and I'm going to walk through these slides and just kind of I'm going to keep walking forward to punch this machine. So if I step in front of this, just go with me on this. This is my backyard, and this is kind of the nature of how I want this discussion to go. In that, you know, I want each of you to feel like the kid with the sombrero. You know, it's like I invite a group of fourth graders over to my house, and it's the tiniest house on the planet, and the kid wears a giant sombrero. It's just like, what the heck is that? So, I mean, I really appreciated our last conversation, and I would like for this to be a dialogue. So as we're going through these slides, talking about this stuff, I hope we'll just ask questions as they come up, or if I say something you need clarification, just holler at me, okay? So I'm going to give you a little background on my story so that you'll kind of understand my framework. And so this is a house that I slowly remodeled in Portland, Oregon, the second Portland. It was a complete piece of crap when I bought it, and I slowly restored it and built my carpentry skills. I studied architectural engineering in college, but never finished my degree and was an environmentalist and never used it. But I did learn power tools and slowly remodeled the house. And this is how I spent every weekend, slowly doing stuff, which was my pleasure. It was my choice, and I really appreciated it. But I did find myself, sure. Yeah. No, back up. See, this is the problem.
Here, let me give you the clip.
What?
Let me give you the clip. Power tool, real power tool.
Does it work? Does it sync up with my computer? Whoa. Let me try. Oh dear. So what I was going to say was, while she's figuring this out, is I'm working on my house all the time. It's kind of my choice, and in the middle of that, I ended up taking a trip to Guatemala and having this very cathartic experience of kind of bumping into how the rest of the world actually lives. And I'm a kind, generous, compassionate person, but I wasn't actually able to kind of be kind and compassionate because I was kind of working all the time to pay my mortgage and my utility bills and buying power tools so that I could finally plumb the bathroom and all of this work, and it just wasn't really feeding me. The other thing that happened was that I was diagnosed with congestive heart failure. And so all of a sudden, I've got this moment of catharsis. This is my moment. Like, this is my one small life. How do I want to live it? Well, I want to be kind and compassionate and generous and have my time and my money to do the things that were important to me. So the idea was to kind of let go of my big house, let go of all of that awesome autonomy, and find a way to build a little house. And I built it myself. It took me 3 months and $10,000 to build. And it stretched me. I learned a shit ton, a lot. And it was something I hadn't ever thought that I would do, but I totally loved it because it gave me a chance to discover that inside me was a little carpenter, and it's inside you. It's inside all of us, because it's innate. It's in our DNA. We're born to be builders. Our forebears were building little shelters, and it's a part of who we are. So rediscovering how to build was something that was really important to me. And then I built it in Portland, Oregon, and I moved to Olympia, Washington. I had met some dear friends who, I kind of started doing this thing where I'd go to dinner with my friends, and just like while we were having dinner, I'd kind of like look in the backyard and see how much space they had and what kind of food they were eating, and ended up picking my friends Huey and they live in this house over to your right, And Aunt Rita, Hugh's aunt, who is 80 years old, disabled, had a stroke years and years and years ago, lived in the other house, and then this is, just to give you a sense of comparing size, this is their garage. And this is my little house. So, I was able to back it into the backyard and commence living. And this is 84 square feet. My systems are super simple. I mentioned this in my talk last night. It's like I was never going to be, I had to play anthropologist with myself in order to pour myself into a space the size of an area. I had to really hard knuckle the reality of how I ate, how I slept, how I pooped, everything. It's like understanding yourself in a new way. And man, I have some weird little habits. It's like you have to kind of come to terms with that. That's all a part of, when you guys were designing your house, it was hard, wasn't it? You had to hard knuckle yourself and like, oh my God, I really need a dishwasher. So this is Rita, and one of the things that was surprising to me, I built a little house. I'm feeling all cocky and cool because now I'm a carpenter, and I'm working part-time for the state, and I've got all this money because I sold my big house. I'm like essentially entering early retirement at 40. And the thing that I didn't anticipate happening is that I absolutely fell in love with Rita. She needed help cooking. She needed help sometimes getting in bed, getting out of bed. She needed a honeydew, and I got to be the honeydew. I got to be the person that would, re-screw the molding on around the door after she'd rip it off with her wheelchair. Or she'd call me and say, could you come over? I'm tangled up in the refrigerator. And I'd go in and she'd like, somehow worked one of the wheels of her chair into the refrigerator. It's just like, how the hell did that happen? So this relationship was a huge surprise, and the same thing could be said about my relationship to nature. Seeing the stars and the moon out my skylight window every night, hearing the rain, and understanding that the rain falls 1,000 million different ways. Understanding how the wind kind of consistently flies out of the southwest and slams into the back of my house and then rolls like a tumbleweed along the roof. Understanding that there are tree frogs that start the first week of April. There are bats that I worry on because there aren't as many as there were even 8.5 years ago when I moved into the backyard. I have this new relationship, and it has created between Rita and Hugh and Annie and Hugh and Annie's kids, Kiva and Kellen, and nature. I've got home. It's not the little house. That's where I sleep. That's where I make really lavish meals that involve opening a can of soup. That's where I invite friends to come over sometimes. We have a little house party. This is for you folks who are interested in building a little house. I have a taunt. This is a taunt for you guys, Boneyard Studios, whatever. Okay, 64 kids, 64 kids in the house with the door shut at one time. Double dog dare. Double dog dare. Yeah, and everything was going great in this particular situation. We had kids on top of the toilet, on top of the kitchen counter, up in the loft, hanging out the back window. No liability waivers were signed, which was starting to kind of scare me. Everything was fine until somebody farted, and then it was just like rats leaving the ship. It was just like, and everybody collapsed in the front yard, fake coughing. And these kids are now in high school, and when I see them, we still have this kind of secret handshake thing that we do, which is like. So this is what I got, and you better believe that it scares the crap out of me to think that city enforcement, county enforcement, some sort of code issue would take away my lifeline. This is my home, and it has very little to do with my little house. Other than my little house gives me a sense of autonomy, and it gives me a place to go cry my eyes out sometimes. And it gives me a place to understand what's going on inside. We all need that sense of solitude. We all need to understand our hardwiring so that we can approach our world with a certain generosity and humility and kindness, which is what I really wanted to do. So the little house is critical for that. This is Kiva, and she's 22 now. She was 13 when I moved into the backyard. So I got to see her grow up and become one of the most insanely cool people on the planet. She just got back from Africa doing some work there. God, I just love her. And she's also, I fell out of the loft last summer and broke my coccyx and my scapula, and I bellowed on the floor like it reminded me of when I was growing up on a farm and our cows would go into labor. I'm just like this, belly moaning. And she ran over and called 911 for me. So she's like my lifesaver now. So let's get into this idea of kind of continuing our conversation a little bit. And I just want to use this as my prompt. And Lena and I were trying to sort this out so that it would make sense. So I want you to understand that the way that I look at the code, it's the written word. Okay? The way Lena might look at the code, it's the color of the word. And we might have a disagreement, because that's red, but what is it to you?
It's black.
No, it's red.
It's black.
It's red. The letters are black. But the intent, the thing that we can maybe come to if we negotiate this reality, is that the intent of the law is the background. The intent, the target, is the color. And what color is that, Lena? Red. Okay, yeah.
Doesn't it say der?
Exactly. Der, red, black. Yeah, you got it. Does that make sense? Okay. So somehow in this discussion we have to negotiate a bit of reality. We have to try to figure out how to work in our left brain and our right brain, like Peter was talking yesterday. So I want to start with zoning codes, and I'm going to completely pass this off to Lena for her discussion later today. So I want to differentiate between zoning, which is a lot of what we were talking about earlier, to things like, as they apply to things like density. Is it safe to have a whole bunch of little houses on a single parcel? Is that creating some sort of fire risk? The code is going to define how many residences can be on a parcel. What are the setbacks from the fence? This is my house, right along the alley. And, what if there was a fire? Could a fire truck get past my house without, would it have to stop and delay access to the house next to mine because my house is so close? These are things that are built into the code to keep us safe. That's what zoning does. It involves size, so that we don't have people who are living in hovels. One of the things we haven't talked about with this group is classism. And the notion that sometimes, like maybe you can think back to when you were in college, or maybe at some point in your life you were homeless, and having a little hovel to live in would have been a gift. So how do we keep people safe so that they're not living in some landlord's piece of crap? Zoning code is designed to address safety issues for the least of us. And we need to keep our eye on that. Codes are good. I don't want some college kid living in an attic apartment that leaks and they get some sort of moldy asthma problem.
You don't want it either.
You don't want to live in a fire trap. So the code is good, and Lena is going to talk more about zoning in her discussion. The thing I want to talk about is building code. And this is the thing that I think is really important for do-it-yourselfers. How many of you would call yourself a do-it-yourselfer? How many of you own, look around. How many of you own at least one how-to book? Do-it-yourselfers. No matter what it is. Whether you're working on little houses, you're a self-taught carpenter, self-taught plumber, self-taught electrician, self-taught dentist, which sounds frightening. You know who you are. So the building code gives us some guidance on how to build safely for do-it-yourselfers. If you haven't studied architectural engineering, you're not a carpenter, you didn't go to school to become a carpenter. How many of you took shop class in high school? God, I love shop class. Yeah. How many of you have taken a Yestermorrow class? Yes. Yeah, that's how you learn, And so, when we're talking about the building code, the thing I want to separate out is this isn't about what you do with your house after you build it. I want to focus on how do you build it so that it's going to be safe, so it's going to withstand a trailer. Okay, so if this was a stack of lumber, I'd still have to apply myself to that. If this was a piece of Chihuly blown glass, an art sculpture, I would still have to apply myself toward that standard, or get a permit to do something different with the Department of Transportation. Does that make sense? Yeah.
The 40 feet long, is that from the ball of the trailer to the back?
Yes. Yeah, and if you go to the Department of Transportation, your state may be different. A lot of states allow for a 14-foot height, but I always encourage people to build to 13 and a half because it ends up being 14. Because you forget that, you know, oh, when I put the ridge cap on, that's going to bump it up, and then I go, oops. Yeah.
I was gonna say, it's pretty easy to go like a little bit over the width and get to like a one-use time oversized permit.
Yeah.
But the height is more critical because there's things like bridges and power lines.
Bridges, power lines, trees, and that's the case. Like every time I've moved my little house, well, the first time I moved my little house, you know, I had some friends in a follow-up car, because I was just like, God, I hope this thing works. You know, I kind of engineered it to, but gosh, I hope that was all true. And so, you know, the first overpass that we came to, you know, so I'm going to drive under an overpass. My friends just backed way up. And I've got this big Ford F-250, a turbo diesel giant truck that I'm not used to driving. And my solution for, you know, this fear that I had was to just floor it. I just was like going to ram through it no matter what, which is, I think, a Washington thing. I don't know if you guys heard about that load that killed the bridge in Washington, collapsed the bridge. I think that driver had the same mentality. And everything went great until I went to turn down the alley and slide my little house into the spot that I had picked. And there was this giant apple tree. And if you know apple trees, you know, they look arthritic to me. They've got just knobby limbs poking out all over the place and stiff hardwood. So we ended up, the neighbors weren't home. So when they came home, we'd help them prune it a little. It was a generous gift that we gave them. So, you know, tree limbs, I think, are a bigger problem for a lot of people. And then residential power lines, you know, if you are trying to move your little house up somebody's driveway. And there's an awesome video of us trying to move Gina's little house into Joan and Rita's backyard. And just the narrow confines of backing up a driveway. You know, every inch matters. Every quarter inch matters when you're trying to get past the, you know, the rafter tails of somebody else's house.
Measure the top and the bottom.
The top and the bottom. Yeah.
Just one quick note, I'm told, like, so truckers have figured this stuff out, right? If you're going from point A to point B, there's mapping services that figure out, you know, for a certain size load, what path to take.
Yep.
13.5 is general good guidance, so I know, like, in Virginia, there's bridges that are 10
Exactly.
feet overpass.
Yeah,
do your homework.
Yes, I usually encourage people, if it's possible, to drive the route first. And it's not just for figuring out where the low stuff is, but like our roads, one lane might be really okay, and the other lane has got giant potholes. So as you're driving your route, you can figure out, okay, I want to be in the right lane for this amount of time, and then I'm going to shift here. And I looked at wind. There's one area right along the Columbia River as I'm driving from Portland to Olympia that is super strong crosswinds. And I was nervous about that. So that was a place that I definitely white-knuckled it and floored it through that area. So this is the other thing that you can do. And this is a trailer that we call the Fatty, and I'm going to talk about that. But the Fatty is, it's built all the way out to the edge of the wheel wells. It's 8.5 feet at the base. So by the time you get the overhang on, it's going to be almost 10 feet wide. And the Department of Transportation allows you to get a special use permit up to 10 feet without having to get your motor carrier endorsement, without having to go through and get carrier insurance. You as an individual can go in and apply, and this is what Tammy and Logan did. They went in and applied for a special use permit for an art sculpture bolted to a utility trailer. And I just love that. and it lasts 30 days. It costs about $30 to get. And I actually recommend, unless you're going to be moving your house a whole lot, just go to get a trip permit, whether it's wide or not. You can save a little money. And most of the little houses that I know of are parked. My house is parked most of the time. I pull it out to Earth Day events, or take it up to the grade school every once in a while. But it's not something. I don't go camping with my little house. Who would do that? Has anybody done that? Nice. Have you really?
I haven't, but I intend to. That's someone who else travel all the way.
Awesome.
So I like to drive. So
That's
what I
awesome.
do.
Yeah, when I have taken my house out and I've gone other places, it's such a weird experience. Like, oh, I have all my clothes here. I didn't pack. So it's an awesome feeling. So now let's get into insurance. And the building code and insurance are linked. Yeah.
On the last slide there, do you have to hire someone to do that, or can you?
You can do it.
You can do it. Okay.
As an individual.
I see.
Logan went in and got this. The thing is that you have to recognize is, and we're going to talk about this, is that you're responsible for that connection.
Okay.
You're saying you've properly secured the load to the trailer. Unless you have an RV certification for your little house. So let's talk about insurance, because it's really important. There are three areas of insurance. One is while you're doing your construction. Is there a way that you can get insurance while you're building? You got a lot of materials, you got that, $2,000 trailer. How do you protect your investment while you're building? The next one is, how do you protect it while you're driving it down the road? And I would talk to your motor carrier insurance on that one. Going back to while you're doing the construction, I'm gonna talk about options for that in just a second. While you're driving, talk to your insurance provider, and it should be a rider on if you're pulling it yourself. You should have a rider that allows you to cover the trailer. The other thing you need to look into is insurance for the load on the trailer. And contractors use that quite often in order to protect, the load that they have, whether they're moving wood or it's a fancy art sculpture. Look into that with your carrier and ask them about that. And then the third kind is after you get it where you're going and it's parked in somebody's backyard, how do you protect it? How do you keep it safe? And I have not been able to find insurance for an uncertified RV. I've heard of products that people have been able to get, but that was almost exclusively through an insurance company called Foremost, and Foremost is no longer offering that product. They
so
know.
If your house burns down, you're not getting any more.
Yeah. So this, let me show you this because it's heartbreaking. But this is Kim's. Are you guys familiar with Kim Langston's story? So this is Kim Langston's little house. It was completely done on the outside and probably 90% done on the inside. Really cute little house. And this is exactly like her partner, Jen Cleese, who went to Yestermorrow and designed and built her little house. I had a photo of that last night. They're kind of, mirror houses. And then, this is what happened. And essentially, a fire started in this big barn, in the electrical panel of the big barn. And there wasn't a known cause. The fire marshal couldn't define why it happened. It wasn't like the circuit overloaded. It could have been, it wasn't that the box was faulty. They think maybe it could have gotten hit by lightning. But in any case, it burned down, and Kim was just out of house. She was out 3 years of planning and helping other people build houses. And, I still can't even look at this without wanting to cry. I mean, this is her stove. Abel went out there to try to salvage the trailer. The trailer wasn't salvageable. The heat had completely warped it. Here's the one thing that survived was the HTT tension ties in the corner. So if you guys have dreams of building this, should break your heart. And it should scare the crap out of you. And that's why I think it's really important that we look at trying to establish some sort of uniform building code for little houses that we could present to an insurance company, and then they can feel like, okay, if you build with this stamp, if you build to this standard, then you can be eligible for our insurance product. Yeah?
Is it possible that a sprinkler system in the ceiling?
A sprinkler system wouldn't have helped this house. The barn was engulfed. The barn looked like this. You know, it wouldn't, the sprinkler system, you know, they're lucky that this fire didn't spread to the houses in the area. It was a massive, fast, that was the thing the fire marshal said, it was a quickly accelerating fire. They had propane tanks inside the garage, or inside the barn. There weren't any propane tanks inside the little house.
The barn's insurance didn't cover this.
What's that?
The barn's insurance. Was there insurance on the barn?
There was insurance on the barn, but this was considered a vehicle. And it was outside the barn. So the barn's insurance didn't cover this. Yeah?
Could she have, it sounds like maybe she wasn't already living in it, but could she have had renter's insurance to cover some of the contents? Is that a possibility?
Well, that's, let's go back to the nice one. So let's say this is parked in somebody's backyard. What are your options for insurance? Right now, like I said, I don't know of any insurance company that will, you know, cover the materials of this load, because they don't know how you built it. You know, when I built my house, I took photos of everything. You know, the tension ties. You know, I wanted to convince. You know, I don't have running water, so I have a pretty simple system. I have a single circuit that runs off of a PV system that run my lights and gadgets. So I have a very simple electrical system. But I took pictures of everything because I wanted to get insurance. And I thought, well, if I show them the quality of work, it'll be fine. I had an insurance underwriter come to my house, crawl under the house. They normally do insurance for travel trailers. And she was just like, this is the beefiest travel trailer I've ever seen. You know, it's like nobody uses tension ties, you know. Travel trailers are lightweight, they're designed to be lightweight. So I do have renter's insurance. I've always had renter's insurance. And it is tied to the property that Hugh and Annie own. So, you know, I got it through farmer's insurance. I have my car insured with State Farm, and State Farm wouldn't give me renter's insurance on my personal property in this. The trick is that your insurance carrier, to get renter's insurance, will want to know how you're using this. It goes to some of what Lena is going to talk about, which is the difference between residing and camping. You know, and so it's against the law to lie to your insurance company. So if you have a fire and you try to claim that, you know, this was your camper and you were camping, and they make a determination like, well, actually, you were living in it and that's illegal, we're not going to honor your claim. So be very frank with your insurance company, be really honest with them and tell them exactly what you want, because you don't want to be in the unfortunate situation of having something happen and you know, you feel like you've got coverage, you've been paying $10 a month for the last 8.5 years, only to discover all that money has been wasted. Maybe the better thing to do, and this is what I tell a lot of people who have little houses, is like, start your own insurance company. Put the money that you would normally pay for rent into the bank, and if anything ever happens, you've got a little nest egg to start over. You know, keep your money away from the insurance company, because ultimately you're going to have to haggle with them about getting a claim anyway. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Same with, gosh, that sends shivers down my spine. Same with financing, and we're going just a little bit long, so I'm going to borrow a couple of my own minutes to just talk about some of the options that I've seen for financing. I think it was Elizabeth who said something about following code in order to get financing. It opens up an option for if you follow a certain code, then all of a sudden your bank may be willing to loan you the money to build an RV. If you tell them you're going to get it certified as an RV. They do insurance for kit cars all the time. So you can talk to an insurance, or financing for kit cars. So talk to a lender and see what's possible. I don't know of anybody who's been able to get a loan though. With a kit car is like somebody building their own car. Like a dune buggy or something like that, or a regular car. So as far as financing goes, most of what I've heard is people pulling money out of savings and assuming that they can pay that money back through the savings that they're going to incur by not paying rent or living lighter. Or in my case, I took the money that I got from selling my big house and applied it to the little house. Or other people have taken and gotten a credit card at Home Depot. It allows no amortization of that credit for a year. And you could buy your materials that way and over the year pay it back as you're going without having the interest added to it. So there are a bunch of different packages out there. Does anybody else have an idea on financing? Yeah.
Credit unions, I haven't tried this personally, but that
Credit union might work.
Planning
Yep.
to try it as opposed to like Bank of America.
Right. Yeah, let's go with the credit union.
Yeah, my
I
credit
love the
union
credit
has a really good, Oregon credit union, up to a $50,000 personal loan, very, very low interest rate.
Cool.
That
There was just a marketing campaign in Portland, Oregon, the second Portland, last year that had a picture of Michelle and her boyfriend outside their little house. And the ad for the credit union was for the next little thing, you know. And the thing that was really funny is that they couldn't get financing for the house. But it's still a good idea. We got to push for that. Yep.
Private financing. There's a lot of money that's around that people are only getting a point and a half. Your grandparents, your parents, or whatever.
Yep.
I mean,
Excellent.
And people don't realize a third of the houses that are in the United States has some level of private financing.
Yeah. Is
So it's
anybody
not
in here privately willing to finance a project?
I would
Yeah.
be in a few years.
How many of you donated to Kim Langston's fund online? You just privatized her building.
Exactly.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, Kim's doing this Kickstarter campaign to try to rebuild, and if you guys are interested, I can send you the link for that. She tells her story, and it's an awesome way for you to kick in $5, $10, or whatever you can, and all of a sudden you're contributing to somebody's, and that juju comes back. It comes back in spades. So I'm going to stop, and we can keep talking about financing and insurance, but I want to move on to the engineering part, okay? Yes?
Well, getting people to help you build your home is kind of a way of financing.
Yep, absolutely. And I really encourage that because it's a lot more fun that way. Yep.
This sounds terrible, but what Emily and I did was we wrote up an official loan statement that a lot of family and friends gave us a little bit of money that we paid back. We actually ended up saving almost all the money, not needing to, but our backup plan was we wrote up this loan agreement and with all the legal leads or whatever. And at the top we included a little story about us, so it was kind of more human as well. And so that was, a lot of people were willing to chip in like $200, $150, even though we didn't need it.
Awesome. Yeah, one of the things on the Kickstarter, by the way, if you're interested, is if you contribute a certain amount of money, you can stay in my house. If you contribute, is it $100?
It's 200.
$200. Wow, that's a lot of money.
I didn't do that much.
Same with if you chip in another certain amount, you can stay in the new little house that's being built. So there are options to try on little houses if you want to contribute. So I'm going to move on to some building dynamics because I think this is really critical. This is the kind of stuff that we teach in our workshops with PAD. So I'm going to fly through this stuff really fast, but if you want more education, please come to one of our workshops or the Yestermorrow workshops. I assume you guys do all this stuff too. So this is just basic stuff, okay? And these are the forces that you have to engineer around with a little house that you're going to put on wheels and take down the road. So we've got uplift and bellowing. And bellowing, I mean, by that, as you're driving down the road, you've got these turbulent winds just kickboxing the side of your house and your roof. And those forces are trying to rip the walls out and push it in, and sometimes at the same time. You know, it's like if you've ever driven, how many of you have ever driven a U-Haul trailer? You know, it's a big giant truck you're not used to. It's like you know, a big semi goes by and you're all over the place. It's really intimidating. So uplift and bellowing are two of the forces we have to deal with. And the way we do that is, like I said before, follow the International Building Code for areas that you're building in a hurricane zone. And it tells you what kind of hurricane clips you got to put here to keep the roof from flying off. And it tells you how to build the collar ties or the loft floor so that you've got this triangle stabilized. And I'll talk about that in a second. So Peter talked about this yesterday in his presentation as he was talking about collar ties, and you come down a third and you put a collar tie there. But with a really small house and you're building a gable roofed house, you can use the loft joists in order to stabilize this triangle. Does that make sense? I did the engineering calcs on this because I'm such a nerd, and I was worried because I only have the loft over half of the interior space, right? So that other half is vulnerable. There's no collar tie. So I wanted to know how, like, what did I need to have a piece of wood that I would strap across those walls at the open end while I was driving down the road? And essentially I found out that it was at 55%. So at 55%, you know, of the length of the house, you need to have something there. And that stabilizes the load. Does that make sense? Okay. And if you say no, I'm going to keep going anyway. The other thing we got to work on is overturning. So you think about it, you know, you've got a plane, you've got the trailer, and you're building something on top of it. And the thing that it's going to want to do when you throw the brakes on, it's going to want to keep going, right? So how do you stabilize that? How do you make sure that that square, perfectly beautiful structure that you've just spent all of your time and energy ogling and building up your biceps for, how do you keep it for when you go to throw the brakes on, flipping over, or you hit a big bump? You know, how do you keep it from staying down? And this is where we get into looking at the International Building Code for earthquakes and how they bolt a house to a foundation. And that's where you get into the HTT tension ties, like that big giant thing that you saw in that burned out picture of Kim's house, and a bolt pattern. And you know, the International Building Code for like San Francisco is that you have a tension tie within 1 foot of the corner. I think I talk about this. I'm gonna wait, I'm gonna say that, never mind. I'm gonna give you some specifics in a minute. The other force that we're dealing with is racking and sliding. So remember the picture of the sad little house? It kind of looked like it was leaning and the top triangle part glass was broken out. So again, we're gonna look at earthquake and hurricane code in order to secure the load to the trailer. The other thing the code does is it defines how materials, what kinds of materials work. So you could look at a span and a load table in the code and match that span and load up with you know, your structure. And if you don't know how to do that, work with an architect. I know you worked with an architect who helped you with this. And you were also doing that funky SIPs thing too, so there was a lot more engineering that went into that. Size and layout of the fasteners, all of that's in the code. So this is my little house, and you know, the way that I stabilized it, I'm just going to point some of these things out. There's the tension tie, bolts that are along the sill plate, and then the really critical thing to keep it from racking is to build shear panels, what we call shear panels. And that's what the sheathing on your house does. You know, you're essentially creating this, you know, tight little bomber package, particularly in the corners. But it's such a small space, you'll end up doing that with all of the sheathing. You know, you're going to put your plywood across all of this, and it's going to stabilize that so the wind isn't going to rack the little house. And then, so you're going to create this bomber little package, this really tough, you know, scrappy little package. And then you're going to use those tension ties and bolts to take that hard little package and put it together with the trailer. Yeah?
And with your tension rods at your ties, do you want to run threaded rod up to the plate?
I've seen people do that, but you don't have to.
But you don't have to. Okay.
No. Right. The American Plywood Association defines the structural strength of 3/8 inch plywood, 1/2 inch plywood. There's tons of information about how to build these shear panels so that you don't have to do that tie down all the way to the top plate.
So you just like
Yeah, yeah. So the other thing that we're working against, this is, this super lightweight package travel trailer. These things are genius. They're spacecraft. They're made out of lightweight materials. They're made, to handle wind. They're aerodynamic. And most of the little houses that I've seen are nothing like that. They're heavy. They weigh between 5,000 and 7,000 pounds. They're not aerodynamic in the least. They're a little house. They're not a travel trailer. So, if you're going to look at borrowing systems, like some people have asked whether or not they could use like the trailer platform from a travel trailer and build a house on top of it. And the concern is that trailer may not be built to handle the massive weight. This is like, a little house is like pulling a cinder block behind your 10-speed bike. It's just clumsy and awkward and heavy. And you're going to get all of that moving. I mean, this should scare the crap out of you. You're going to get all of that in mass, say 6,000 pounds, in motion, going 55 miles an hour. And then you're going to try to make it stop. And our engineering needs to be true on that. The other tension that we have is we want, a lot of times, after we get it in place, we want the trailer to kind of disappear. Kind of want to have systems so that, we get foliage around the trailer. So, we don't want to necessarily have we want the trailer to fit the load. Otherwise, you end up with a huge, gangly, massive trailer. So this is just to kind of give you guys an idea of the kind of process for having a trailer made and then putting a floor and attaching a floor to it. So this is the trailer, and I'm going to walk through the components of that in a minute, but then we're going to add something to it. So we got a regular utility trailer, then we're going to add some metal to the sides, and then we're going to build a floor structure, and that's going to be this is an undercarriage, and this is just a regular floor frame. So you're going to put that undercarriage on top of this floor frame and flip it over. Okay, so now you've got the plywood on the bottom, and then you're going to insulate it, and then you're going to put it inside the trailer. So we're going to walk through. Does that make any sense at all yet? We'll walk through it a little bit. This is what it looks like. This is wood. This is metal. Okay?
And what's the white stuff?
I don't know. Oh, that's the trailer.
Oh,
That's
so
the
you're
trailer.
building inside of the frame of the trailer.
So this yellow is wood. It's wood floor joists. This is metal, and this is metal. And we'll walk through that. So this is a standard utility trailer. This is what we recommend. I know if you're building something shorter, like one of Abel's Bardos, something that you don't need to go all the way up, you can do a deck over trailer, because ultimately the height from this is a utility trailer. The height from this to the ground is typically about 22 inches, 22 to 24 inches, right around in there. So that's 2 feet that's taken up with the foundation of your house. That means you only have 11 and a half feet left to stay inside the DOT code. Does that make sense? Okay. Yep.
There's a gal building a tiny house in North Carolina who mentioned that you were recommending painted marine wood.
Yeah.
I haven't found anything on your website about that. I looked
Oh, well, I'll show you.
Okay.
Yeah. So, just to understand the components of a trailer, if you're not familiar, this is decking. It's usually 2x6s, and it's bolted into these little metal cross braces that go across. And those little metal cross braces that you can't see are 1.5 inches down from the top, so that the decking, see how smooth this decking is? It's even with the metal, so that's the decking. This is what we're calling the side rail, because it's on the side. And then you've got a wheel well, wheels and axles. There's springer rods underneath there that kind of balance the load. As far as trailer talk goes, this is the tail and that's the tongue. So the tongue is the part that you hook to the truck.
Excuse me, did
Yeah.
you say 22 inches from the top of the deck to the ground?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's right at the part that is going to cripple you if you run into it. So this is a typical drawing that you might take to a trailer manufacturer. And you know, you tell them you want an 18-foot trailer, this is a 14-foot trailer. He's gonna figure out, or they are gonna figure out where to put the axles. And they do that based on the materials that they're using for constructing the trailer and wanting to make sure that no more than about 15% of the overall weight is on the tongue. So you're gonna tell them what you're gonna build, how much it's gonna weigh, and they're going to figure out where the wheel wells go, where the axles go. Does that make sense? And it's typically, the midpoint of a tandem axle trailer is this 60-40 split. So if you're working on a design and you're trying to figure out how to network around the wheel wells, this is a good general rule of thumb. Then the other thing that I recommend is you're going to modify the trailer then. It's a standard utility trailer, but you're going to say, however, I want these extra little things. I want it to be just a little bit different. I want you to put 3-inch angle iron on the outside side rail, left and right. And what that's going to do is that's going to create a surface for your wall to come down, and then you can access underneath it to bolt the tension type and the bolts. That way you can bolt it to the trailer. The walls are going to fit right on top of that and bolt down. And then you're also going to have holes in the side. And that's going to allow you to take the frame, the wood frame, and set it inside this trailer and then bolt in through the sides. So you're going through the sides and straight down. So you're creating this like little Russian teacuppy kind of thing. Yeah?
The washers, are they welded in place then?
They're welded. So they use a plasma cutter, cut a big hole, and then use a washer to dress it up.
What do you call the lip?
The lip, it's just angle iron. So the other thing you're going to ask them to do, this is a standard utility trailer, like I said, and the ribs, this is a rib, it sits 1.5 inches down from the top so they can put all this decking on. You don't need that decking, and you want the rib to be welded below so that you get 4 to 5.5 inches, and that's your surface that you're going to insulate. That's going to be a 2x6. That you're going to build the floor frame out of, and you're going to nest it right inside there.
So you mean those supports under there are only welded to the underneath of the frame?
Yeah.
That sounds really weird.
Well, you're bolting the stringer for the floor joist to the side rail. So those ribs are
Just keep it together. It's not much work.
they actually keep the undercarriage secure. You don't have to have these. And if you look at, there's a website called, what's it called? It's Kevin Rose's, Kevin, who I think is in Vermont. Have you heard of Kevin Rose? I can't remember his blog site now. But he didn't even use, when he built his little house, he didn't even have, Gypsy Rose, that's it. He didn't even have these cross braces because he just used joist hangers. But I like to use them because they secure the undercarriage a little bit. Yeah?
Is there a position on the bolting through, high or low on that?
Right in the middle.
Right in the middle.
Yeah, this one looks a little bit high, but we made it work. So you just want it right in the middle. You want it to stick right in the center of the joist, and I'll show you what that looks like. The other thing to kind of keep in mind, and I've already touched on this, is the difference between buying something new and used. So you can take a used trailer and make it work. You can engineer it to create this floor framing system that works for you. The challenge is making sure that the trailer is rated for the load that's going to be on it. In a little house, my house weighs almost 5,000 pounds. It's 14 feet long. It's made out of lightweight cedar, plywood, 2x4s, tar paper. It's got a metal roof. I don't have concrete countertops or tile floors. It's a pretty light package, and it weighs almost 5,000 pounds. You know, and then, larger houses, Brittany's house that Lena mentioned, it's an 18-foot house, right? 18? Little more than that, but 18-foot house, and it was 6,200. Yeah. So, I typically tell people to ask for a tandem axle utility trailer with 3,500 pound axles. That means you can carry a payload of 7,000 pounds. And all of this is in Go House Go if you guys are interested in it too. So, are you falling asleep yet, Peter? Feel good? Feel good. I know you probably are seeing some things you do different. Really, yep. Yeah.
Dee, one thing on the access too that I learned is that if you get like an rating of 10,000 pounds or under, you don't need a commercial driver's license, but if it's over, at least in our area, if it's over 10,000 pounds, you need a commercial driver's license when you're towing that.
Right. And if you're going to build something that weighs over 10,000 pounds, you need to go to tiny house camp. Brian. I do like the shelving though that you have with all of that alcohol. Just saying. Just saying. Yeah. So these things, just to understand the components, these are rocker arms, and you know, the springs. Actually, the rocker arms are in between, and they kind of keep the wheels working together. So if you lift up over a curb, the other wheel is still on the ground. You know, and they should slide together like butter. When you guys were moving your house, did you hit any curbs? Tell us a horror story.
Yeah, we hired a professional mover, and it was a great investment.
Professional mover, yeah.
It's not that expensive, and you have someone with a lot of experience with the roads.
Yeah.
And all the risks can happen. So.
Brilliant, yeah. So let me walk you through this process. This is us. This is a Vardo that we built a couple years ago. And this is just a 2x6. This is treated wood, but you don't need to use treated wood if you're building an undercarriage that is tight, that's not going to get moisture in it. So we weren't sure because we were using aluminum as an undercarriage that had gaps in it, so there was going to be some airflow. So this is treated wood. And you assemble that, and then you roll the undercarriage over it. And this piece of plastic is just to protect, since this wood had metals in it, it's treated with copper, chrome, and arsenic, that treated with nasty stuff. It would react with this aluminum sheeting. So you need to separate them somehow so they don't come into contact, and you get this galvanic reaction and things fall apart eventually. So we assemble that, and then another option is this marine grade plywood, and this is essentially quarter-inch wood, quarter-inch sheet of plywood that we then went to we went to the rebuilding center and bought like the cheapest paint we could find that was oil-based so that it would penetrate into that wood, and coated it. So and this is the way that I recommend doing it, better than the aluminum. Darren of Shelterwise, I showed you a picture of his little house. He actually has the trailer fabricated with a metal pan as the undercarriage. Super easy to have done. So there are options around that undercarriage.
What do you mean a metal pan?
Like a sheet of metal on the bottom.
Not aluminum, you mean, some other kind?
Not aluminum.
Okay.
Yeah, just regular steel. And it's heavy, but we just built there's a little house called the Casa Bikini that we just did a workshop with, and constructing the floor with that pan already there was just awesome. Yeah?
So is the undercarriage attached to those lowered ribs? Is that?
It's not attached to the ribs. It is attached, you just screw it into the floor joist.
Oh, okay.
So it's screwed and glued into the floor joist. And then it rests on top of those metal ribs. So those metal ribs kind of sandwich it together.
Between the joists.
Yeah, but you don't need to do anything up through those ribs into the floor, because it's pinned in from the sides. So that floor is stabilized by the bolts that you put in through the side.
Yeah.
So then you're going to flip it over and set it into place. And you can see us then putting the bolts through and bolting it together. This is a little bit of a different design, where we wanted to have, the trailer was only 4 inches deep, the side rails were only 4 inches, but we wanted 5.5 inches of insulation. So we used a 2x6 and then put a little wooden filler here on the side, you know, to even it up. Then the wall sits on top of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Good.
You add a tremendous amount of weight with the pressure-treated wood.
Yes.
So even with the plywood underneath, do you think that you could use cedar?
I do. I think you could use cedar, and I think it'd be fine. Yeah.
Would you trust the integrity of cedar?
I would trust it if I was paying attention while I was building it, and I was really buttoning the package up. and I was caulking and sealing and gluing and screwing and doing a good job with that. But if you're a first-time builder, I wouldn't trust it unless you are a stickler for detail, because you really don't want any moisture in that package. Yeah?
The other problem with the pressure treated is the galvanic reactions with the screws and things too. So you could be paying attention, but also lose some of your strength that way.
Right. Yeah, really good point. So after you get you've got the wood frame, then you're going to insulate it, and most of the little houses that I know of have used this closed foam, and it's got an R value of like R10 for every 2 inches, so you can get like an R20 floor, not counting the thermal breaks that you're going to have in the framing. What'd you guys use? Emily? I mean, Susan, what'd you guys use?
Pink foam.
Pink foam?
Yeah.
Okay.
We loaded it up.
Okay, good.
Vermont.
Good. Yeah. So after you get this type of insulation in, then you have to seal it up. Some of the other ways that we've seen it done then, this is Tammy and Logan's house. And don't you guys wish you were listening to what they were saying right now? I'll just say that one more time. I wish I was. So this is wool from Oregon Shepherd. It's a local Oregon company, the second, Portland. And essentially we had to make these little pockets out of plastic, because this has a moisture barrier, but we were really nervous about this getting wet. So you have to just make sure that you're really sealing this up. And that's the nice thing about the closed cell foam, is that you don't have to worry about that. So the other thing I wanted to show you is that, before you can put the decking on this, before you can seal up the floor, you might want to consider where you're going to run your pipes. So this is where they have their shower stall. This is where the kitchen sink is. So you need to know what your plumbing situation is. Are you going to drop it straight down like a trailer and run the plumbing? Is that how you did it? Run the plumbing underneath?
No, we're running everything out the walls.
Out the walls, yeah.
I think next house is
Yeah, it depends. It depends on what your weather conditions are. And dropping stuff below the floor, if you're in Vermont and it gets cold, might not work. So this was, yeah.
The wool, was that washed?
Yes, it's washed. Yeah, it's treated then with borate as a flame retardant and as a mold inhibitor. And then sheep have a natural lanolin that is a mold inhibitor.
Okay.
We didn't check for moths. I can't guarantee that there isn't a problem with that.
Well, wool is actually flame retardant.
Yeah, they have to treat it in order for it to be certified for use in residential, commercial dwellings. Yeah.
Who treats it?
They do. The Oregon, the company that they bought it from. Yeah. So this is one other trailer option that I wanted to talk to you guys about. I showed you, we call it the fatty. And essentially, this is the side rail. Normally, the last trailer I talked about, this 3-inch angle iron was here, welded up against this. In this case, you've got this second side rail that is used to attach this angle iron. And we're working with the trailer manufacturer to come up with a lighter package on this. Is there a way that we can fabricate the fatty to lighten up the amount of metal in it? Because that's going to save money when people go to buy these. It also, this little pocket gets full of insulation, but there's huge thermal bridging between everywhere you have the trailer. You've got open air underneath here that's cold. That cold air is going to travel right through the metal and into your house. So how do you break that? How do you stop that thermal bridging? And Darren has done, at ShelterWise, has done a really cool way of kind of changing the trailer design and changing the floor design to address that thermal bridging. And if you're curious about that, see me and I'll tell you how he did it. The other way to think about the flooring is to bypass the trailer altogether. I've talked to a lot of people who, not this is just a shed, okay? Because look at that, that's sad. But essentially building on skids and building it with a certain size so that it could be ratcheted up onto a trailer if it had to be moved. So that's another option for you if you're thinking about wanting to build something that's sometimes portable. So good options. So that's, I want to step away from the flooring. Does anybody have any questions about that right now? Kind of the, yeah.
I was just gonna say, we build stuff on skids all the time, so if people want to talk about that option, talk to me. We build probably
Awesome.
10 or 12 a year on skids.
Cool. Yeah, the little house that's down there in the, what do you call that?
The hanger.
The hangar. It's in the hangar. You can see the big giant eye bolts.
Yeah.
These big eye bolts on the skid part and then also up high on the wall. It's kind of cool to go look at if you have a minute. So now let's talk about the walls. And again, we're going to construct these to handle 90, 110 mile an hour winds. That may be shear winds, maybe coming from one direction, but more likely if you're taking it down the highway, it's tumbling. It's pulling and punching at the same time. And so how do you design the walls to handle that kind of stress? So it's all in the sheathing. Most of the little houses that I've seen just use 2x4 construction because it's light. The downside is you can't get as much insulation into the wall. But if you're willing to have a little less insulation, 2x4s are fine structurally. You can put them 24 inches on center and they can handle the weight of the roof. It's a little structure, 2x4s are fine. Then you're going to hang the plywood off of it, and we typically recommend that people use 3/8 inch sheathing. That's OSB or CVX. OSB, it's just the kind. So OSB is this kind of wood. It's rated for outdoor use. The OS, did I just say OSB?
Yeah.
Okay, OSB is this stuff, sorry. It's the stuff that looks like pencil shavings glued together, and it's glued together with a phenolic resin. And it's kind of nasty. They mix phenol and sodium hydroxide to make a really bomber glue. So if you don't want as much glue and you want a little more wood, then you can go with something called CVX, which is an exterior grade plywood. And code allows you to build with 3/8 inch thick wood. But if you're going to hang really heavy siding, you need to go with thicker sheathing. And then the trick in handling these super high winds and vibration is you're going to want to attach the top plate and the bottom plate. If you can get it out of a single sheet of plywood, that's what you want to do. And you could go to the American Plywood Association and they tell you exactly how far apart to put these screws. And everything is going to be screwed and glued. So you're backing up the fasteners. Every place you have a fastener is a pivot point, right? So, let's see if we can, why don't you stand, no, come on up here. Will you come up for a minute? So turn and don't burn your retinas. Yeah, stand there. And I want you guys to stand far enough apart to kind of go like that. Yeah. Okay. So if the only thing I have holding these 2x4s, this is the top plate, okay? And I've got a couple of screws coming down into my stud. This is a pivot point all of a sudden. So if I put pressure on the wind, yeah, it's going to move. So if all of a sudden we take a sheet of plywood and connect the bottom all the way up and over and down, you've got this big mass. Now connect your feet. Okay? You've removed the pivot point because you've created this big square. So then when the wind hits it, the studs work. The studs are stronger. And it's the plywood, it's the sheathing. It's awesome. How you doing? Okay. All right. Big round of applause for our studs. So typically the screw and glue pattern that we say is 6 inches along the edge, and by that I mean the edge of the plywood, all along the top, all along the stud, all along the bottom, and then the screws in between, like if there's another stud in here, that you can put 12 inches apart. And this is just the building code. It's our friend. We want to build the code.
These are special screws, right? Shear resistant?
No, they're regular screws. And it's backed up because you're gluing it. You're using construction adhesive at the same time. And I just use deck screws. I just use regular old deck screws for everything. And I use a square head because they're easier on my lady arms. So, huh?
Square head.
Yeah, it's a square drive. Robinson, is that the type? Okay. Right, right. Instead of a Phillips head or a flathead, it's called Robinson.
So you're
Got
using
it.
galvanized screws?
No, just regular deck screws. It's called a deck mate. Deck mate. So here we are kind of screwing the walls together, and you can use the building platform as your building platform. We're screwing together a header over the wheel well, and that header is going to sit about a 1/4 inch above the wheel well. That wheel well, all it's doing is keeping the rain from coming inside the house. It's not structural. You can stand on it, but it could bend. You know, it's not structural at all. So you build a header over that. And it's a 2x6 because it's going to have to span a little more than 5 feet. This is all in the code. It's all in a book. And then there are the tricky things, the engineering things. So this is Tammy and Logan's house. And the thing is that look at all this open space. There's a window here, and this big open door. Like, how do you secure that? How do you keep that from racking when so much of it is glass and a door? You know, and the secret is to try to make a square out of it, to try to reinforce any area that you can. So ultimately what I wanted to do is take a banding strap and strap this somehow to stabilize it while it's moving. But after talking to a couple of friends and looking at the engineering on it, we just made these really beefy shear panels below the windows out of 3/4 inch plywood that's screwed and glued every 2 inches along the edge and every 4 inches, so it's a lot of screws. And then we did the same thing on the inside. So below the window, the same thing happened. So you're just engineering this really bomber little drum. Does that make sense? Same thing goes when you're creating a big open space. Like this is the back sitting area at Tammy and Logan's house, and a couple of Gina's house and Michelle's house, the other little houses that we built, have this little bump out. So, you know, how do you stabilize this wall area? And again, we just put plywood, extra thick plywood, screwed in a tighter pattern on it. We call that a nailing pattern. Screwed it in with the screws closer together, and then put it on the inside too. Yeah?
Have you considered using angle iron in the corners?
Angle iron would work great. Yeah, and people do that with some of the framing plans that I've seen. They just use wood to do that. So you can beef it up that way with the timbers inside. Yeah.
Even I was thinking gusset plate, just as
A gusset plate, yep.
Put it up in the corner above the windows.
Yep.
What's a gusset plate? A triangle as big as you could fit it in the corner, so that you're screwing through the vertical and the horizontal and keeping that from breaking.
Yeah. So in Tammy and Logan's house, when we put the plywood in, this corner becomes super critical with the plywood. You know, so that you're essentially gusseting this wall to that wall with the plywood. These are all pivot points, right? Pivot point, and we want our studs to work together. So how do we get them to work together? Okay. So I want to go through this wall connection, and then we'll have some question and answer. So this is a section of what we're going to do after we get the wall in place. This is the header over the wheel well. Then Kim, because she's the smallest person we know, and it was one of her houses, she had to drill all the holes, and it was really hard. So essentially you drill through the bottom plate into that angle iron, and then you, in the corner, within 1 foot of each corner, you're going to install this tension tie, HTT tension tie. I'm sorry, this is popping a lot. Sorry about that. And then every 6 feet away from that tension tie, you're going to put another bolt through and that's the code. Within 1 foot of the corner goes the tension tie, and then every 6 feet along the plane, you're going to have a bolt. And most people I know double that up. They put them every 3 feet. Just makes them feel good. And that's fine. Does this section make sense? So you're going to bolt this when you install the floor, you're going to bolt this way through the trailer. Then when you lift the wall up into place, you're going to bolt down through the angle iron. That's what it looks like. That's the tension tie.
How tall is that?
They range. This is, I think this one's 22 inches. It's called HTT22. There's another one that's an HTT14, and that one structurally will, if you go to the Simpson Strong Tie, this is a Simpson company, if you go to whatever your local fastener distributor is, if you go to their website, they'll give you all of the engineering on this stuff, so you can know how much uplift each one of these tension ties or hurricane clip, how much wind can it handle, how much uplift can it handle. And if you're a nerd like me, that stuff is just like, you know, it's midnight and I'm just like, oh my God, 4,327 pounds of uplift! It's a miracle! I really do that. Yeah, Maxine?
So do you put, after you drilled through the angle iron and you have that exposed metal now, do you use a rubber grommet or a silicone it, or what do you use to seal the rust from rust coming in?
You can use silicone and you can use Loctite to keep it from vibrating loose, and also use a lock washer. And then the secret on this, if you go to the, get information about any kind of fastener you're going to use, every one of the holes in this thing needs to be filled with a nail, and it's a certain kind of nail. And it's engineered so that every single hole is used. It's not overkill, it's the way it's designed to work. So if you skip half the holes because you're like, that seems like maybe they're just thinking people are going to miss a 2x4 or something, you're gonna lessen the capacity of this thing for working. Same with, as you put these bolts in, if you over tighten them, you're putting a load already on it. If you flex your arm, and you're loading it up and somebody comes up and tries to pull your arm down, you're going to get fatigue a lot faster. And I don't know, that's not a very good example. But anybody else have a question?
I'm surprised the foot isn't longer.
Yeah, well that beefy little thing is, it's about 3/8 of an inch of metal in a bolt.
It's so close to the end of the wood there.
Yeah, those engineers, they're crazy. I went to this Simpson Strong Tie class, and I have no idea how I got in. I just applied and they let me go. It was free, and they had donuts and little rulers that they gave us. It was really cool. And all we did is like eat donuts, drink coffee. But I was in this class with a bunch of code enforcement people, like building inspectors, and all we did was like watch things fall. We watched videos of walls falling apart. And it was awesome. These guys were like, oh, let it go, it's going down, it's going down. It was awesome. And so this is where you don't necessarily need to understand, because somebody else has a PhD in Simpson Strong Tie engineering, and they've put all of this stuff to work. They've tested it and tested it and tested it, because ultimately this is what building code enforcement folks are going to ask you to do, because they know it works. So it has to be certified for a certain kind of performance. Yeah?
I noticed in a couple of cases the nuts were inside the building and the bolt was outside.
You can have it both ways. There are bolts that you can use that are threaded on both ends, so that's probably what it was. So you can either thread it from below or above, it doesn't matter.
So when you spoke about having people come out to make sure it's being certified, how many different times in it, how many different stages do you have that?
I would talk to them about that, because your local DOT person may have specifics on that. But typically when you build a building, it's going to be to come out and check the structural, then they're going to come out and check the HVAC, and then they're going to come out and check your plumbing, and then you've got 3 different inspections, or 4 or 5, however many different inspections. So I would check with whatever your Department of Motor Vehicles or DOT says. Yeah?
Is there a history of disasters? Are you aware of people who poorly built and then there was a...
I don't know. I mean, I've heard a story about, little houses traveling from Iowa to California, and halfway through there was a little shift off the trailer, but they just backed into a building until it got true. So, I mean, I had a cab over camper that I lived in for a little while, and I was driving across country, and a cab over, it's just like a big parachute, So it would catch the wind and it would buck and bounce, and then every Every time I'd stop to get gas, I'd just back it into something and shove it forward. So that's not safe. Let me go through a couple more. Again, there's banding strap that you can put over the top of the ridge board to connect this rafter to this rafter. So you've got these things working together, and then hurricane clips that tie each rafter into the top plate. Loft joists. Peter talked yesterday about balloon framing, and that's what I advocate because you end up using a lot less wood in a little house. So you can hang the loft joists off the studs, and if you're not familiar with balloon framing, Ching, the book that I referenced earlier, goes into a lot of really awesome illustrated details on the difference between platform framing and balloon framing. So ultimately, you know, it depends on, these are 2x4s in Tammy and Logan's house, and we were able to use 2x4s 24 inches apart because there was a bathroom wall that actually supports those. So look at the engineering. You can span a 2x4 about 4 feet. It's 24 inches on center, you know, 24 inches between this 2x4 and that 2x4. You can span about 4 feet before the floor starts to get spongy. So one way that you can correct for that is to move the 2x4s closer together, and you can put the 2x4s 16 inches on center, and that way you can kind of eliminate that sponginess. Does that make sense? We're kind of covering this stuff really fast, and it's a little annoying, so I apologize. Roofing, same thing. Like I said before, you know, this little detail is super important, especially on the lead end of the house. I mean, imagine, you know, you've got an overhang and you've got 70-mile-an-hour wind trying to rip that thing off. So your outriggers and how you design those and build those become really important. They really stabilize the little bonnet for you. Sheathing, we already talked about that. Overhangs, I just said a whole bunch about that. I think that's all I want to talk about right now. The other thing, I guess I'll end with this, and then we can just have questions and answers for the next 10 minutes. Everything has to get screwed down. So this is board and batten. So this is actually, this is old, what we call T111 that came out of, this is Gina's house. It came out of her parents' cabin, or her grandparents' cabin. So it's big sheets of plywood, essentially. And so we used it on the exterior and sealed it up and then added these battens, these little strips, to make it look nice. Everything is either, you got to attach it with ring shank nails or screws, because vibration and wind are not your friend. Same with the roofing. You know, all of that has to be screwed down. So I think I'll stop there and let's just have some questions. I have a bunch of stuff on moisture control and ventilation that I can talk to you about separately. Yeah?